Welcome back to the Untriggered Parenting Podcast with me, Paula Sampson Lawrence. My special guest today is Anthony Damaschino. Anthony is the author of The Empty Nest Blueprint, and today he discusses how parents can prepare for the empty nest stage and how they can live their very best empty nest life. Let's dive in.
Welcome, Anthony, to the show. Very excited to talk to you, mainly because you have written a book about the empty nest life. And I'm in the throes of young parenthood. So the thought of empty nest seems so far in the distance. So I'm really excited to sort of tackle that whole topic with you. But first of all, please introduce yourself and let us know a little bit more about you.
Sure, Paula. And thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. I'm a fan of the podcast. So
absolutely.
Thank you. And I think you're doing amazing things with empowering girls. I have two of them. Yeah. But before I go down that path, so I call myself a recovering HR executive. Mm-hmm. I'm a father of three. I used to work in the HR field. My wife is a first grade teacher. And I left HR to write this book. And wow. It's called The Empty Nest Blueprint. And the reason why I wrote it is because there wasn't a roadmap out there when I was looking. There wasn't the Girlfriend's Guide to Pregnancy or the what to expect when you're expecting for empty nesters.
Yeah, that is actually very true. It's not something that people... It's like we haven't gotten to it yet, so we'll just sort of leave it and see what happens. So there's no sort of preparation. Absolutely agree with you there. So so that's what inspired you to write that book.
It did.
So what would you say that are some of the misconceptions about that stage in your life?
Yeah, I think when people think of becoming an empty nester, they think, oh, my kids are off to college or the military or moving out and working on their own. And I have all this free time and I'm going to be like happily retired and no financial pressure. And it's like this paradise, so to speak. Yes. But as you well know, especially in today's society, we are really connected to our children, right? Like never before. We know where they are. Our parents didn't know where we were when we went out and when we had fun with friends. So the misconception, I think, is it's a bigger emotional step than people think it is. And part of that is because you have this close bond or relationship, hopefully, with your child. And when they leave, it does leave a void. And of course, there is continued financial support and pressures. The numbers state that, right? That when that child leaves the house, that doesn't mean you stop paying for their streaming services, cell phone, car insurance, or whatever else. And so I think the misconception is that it's just an easy thing that'll happen. And that's why I call it kind of the most underrated stage of your life, because you're prepared when you're single and you think about dating and maybe you get married or you have a partner and then there's childbirth and parenting. But when it comes to and then there's even retirement, Paula, right? Eventually we're going to retire. Yeah. But that gap between active parenting and retirement, it's just not talked about. And that's really the empty nest phase, the empty nest journey that all of us as parents will go through at one point in time.
Yeah. And do you think, talking personally, were you prepared for it? Mentally, emotionally?
It's funny. So I wasn't prepared when my first child, my eldest son, I have a son and two younger daughters. When he left, I battled with a lot of things that I'm sure you deal with in your consulting. So loss of control. I think I was a very supportive parent, but I was also a helicopter parent in many ways. And controlling what they're doing, their biggest advocate, but also, that person that's always there on their shoulder. Have you done your homework? What are you doing? And so when my son left, it was very difficult for me to kind of adjust to no longer being in control, if you will. And we had some negotiables that we did, and I can talk about those when my kids went off to school. But the other side of it was I was very work focused and I was very family focused, but I wasn't as focused on my relationship with my spouse. Because out of all the people we can take advantage of, Paula, you have to show up to work, you have to feed your child, you have to pay the bill for your home. But, you know, your spouse or significant other, you can put them on that back burner and get away with it because it's the one person in the world, essentially, that will forgive you or let you do that. And so I felt like there was a lot of disconnection in that relationship. And so that's a relationship, obviously, with the spouse. And then there's the relationship with your children. And then there's the relationship with yourself going through that time in life.
And do you think that your son felt that sort of battle that you had in terms of having the control and then losing it? Do you think he felt that, or was it more an internal monologue for you?
I think he did, and I, you know, I made up this term of two terms: the disengaged child and the engaged child. I guess right before they launch, and so. For my son, I think he was becoming more alpha male, wanting to stretch his independence, want to get out there in the world. I know, Dad, I know, you know, I'm on my own. And so before, you know, as he got ready to leave, he was more disengaging from the family, almost not a divorce, if you will, but more of a, I'm on my own, I'm independent, I know what I need. And then there's the other side of that coin, which is the nostalgic child that wants to connect more and see all their friends and spend time with their parents before they leave and really, you know, be in their room and watch movies and be at home. And so that dichotomy, both my daughters were more nostalgic. My son was more disengaged.
I see.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. And did you find that then more difficult, I guess,
absolutely,
to make that separation?
Yeah. So as all good parents, you learn well with the first one. You also probably make the most mistakes with the first one. So when Everest left, and that's his name, he I did see all of these gaps, and that led me down a path to kind of come up with a plan, look at my relationships. So when my daughters left, I had a much stronger foundation about what I would be going through emotionally, what my wife would be going through emotionally, and expectations and things that I wanted to set as they launched versus, you know, just kind of playing it by ear, which again, as parents, that's what we do with our first child in many ways.
And so was there big gaps between your three children leaving, or did you was it just on the trot, one after the other?
Every 2 years, right? So they're 2 years apart, or at least scholastically, they're 2 years apart. The realization when my son left is when I really started diving into the empty nest topic and trying to learn as much as I could about that time in life for all of us. And do a lot of, I'm sure, a lot of the same research you've done, which is, you know, parent-child to parent-adult relationships, looking at my parenting style, my parents' parenting style, all of those things kind of came flooding into my head as I realized I wasn't really prepared for this stage, either emotionally or connecting with my spouse or connecting with my children, right?
Yeah. I wanted to touch on quickly, we talked about not being prepared for that sort of emotional upheaval as much as we know it was coming. Do you feel that your children were prepared to go out do you feel like you prepared them enough, I suppose, to go out into the world?
You know, I do. I think they were all ready to leave when they left. I mean, I know that sounds funny. Show me the 18-year-old in the US that isn't ready to leave at 18. You know, obviously there's there's the practical preparedness, Paula. So that's like, can you cook an egg? Can you do laundry? Can you pay a bill? You know, as simple things as do you even use email? And I know for you and I, that's a second nature, but for a lot of kids, they just text, right? Well, schools aren't teachers aren't texting them assignments. they're
Mhm.
sending them via email, right? And so just kind of those basics.
Yes.
And then there's the, how ready are you for life, right? So how ready are you for an uncomfortable situation after you've been drinking, an uncomfortable situation where there's a lot of peer pressure, an uncomfortable situation, or just a pressure situation in college or out on your own. And so I felt like my children were prepared. We obviously did some cooking and some laundry lessons before some left. Others knew how to do it. But my biggest fear when they went off was probably for my girls, it was safety.
Yes.
And for my son, it was probably good decision making, if you will.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
It's
I
so,
don't mean to be sexist, but
No.
I want confident, strong women, confident, strong
Yes. Yeah.
girls.
Yeah.
And so buddy systems and don't accept a drink from somebody. And it's horrible. We live in a world where those have to be lessons taught. But as a father, as a parent, we all feel those things, right?
Yeah, we do, and I totally agree with you. And I don't think it's a sexist thing. It's just reality, isn't it? With girls, we worry about safety. A lot of the mums and of just parents that I deal with, they worry about as their daughters are growing up. How can I teach her to be safe? How can I teach her to recognize danger? That kind of thing. It's a big worry as a parent. So I can imagine that feeling of, okay, now you're on your own. Do you know what you're doing?
Yeah.
have I taught you enough? Is it okay?
And Paula, we're really and back to the control thing. They are out of our control. I mean, you can set rules, but let's be honest. You set a rule when they're in your house. Yes. They have to be home by 10. They show up at 10 or they don't show up at 10. There's repercussions. But when they're off on their own, you have to shift from rules to expectations. So, I dropped all of the rules and it was more about having a conversation about what do you expect from me and what do I expect from you? And that could be grades, that could be finances, that could be communication. Are we going to talk every week? Are we going to talk whenever you want to text me, daughter? Right? Finances was obviously a long conversation. And then, of course, grades was a big conversation as people go on to school.
Yeah.
When they're in your house, you kind of micromanage grades or you see grades or you get grades. Off in college, just like in the healthcare system, they're on their own, right? I no longer can see any medical information of my daughter, and I can no longer see the grades for my daughter because she's out, right?
Yes.
So there are expectations, I think, that needed to be set or at least discussed so that there wouldn't be future problems later on.
Yeah, which totally makes sense. And it's building in that transition, I suppose, isn't it? Because you can't just go from, like you said, sort of micromanaging to nothing. There needs to be a little bit of a transition, and for both sides, for parent and the child.
Absolutely.
What I was going to ask very quickly was, when you were talking at the beginning about what we expect this day to look like, there's a bit of excitement. There's, I'm going to get my life back, going to do this when they're going to cruise, start doing this, but the reality of it is there is a little bit of sadness and loss.
Absolutely.
But that's not the whole story. There is, it probably falls somewhere in the middle, do you think, where there is that excitement of a new lease of life, along with the sadness of loss. So how do you sort of navigate those two sets of emotions?
Yeah, it's a great so I like it. So the definition is empty nest syndrome, right? And that is it's not a medical condition, but it's a effect that people go through, and that's loss and sadness and grief when a child leaves. Now, for some, they don't experience that at all or very minor, right? You're sad, you hug your child goodbye and they leave and you're fine. For others, it can be a lot more severe. And if we think about it, Paula, think about a single parent who has raised a child or children for multiple years, and that child has become the cornerstone of their life. Their activities, their social relationships, all revolve around that child. When that child leaves, that's a much more severe situation for a parent to go through. So at first, there's can be situational depression, if you will. But situational depression is like if someone dies, you are sad for a little while, but with time comes healing and you hope to come out of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think the same holds true with becoming an empty nester. Yes, there's sadness at the beginning. It could be temporary. It can extend a little bit longer. Sure, you'll miss your children at different points in time, but there is the other side of the rainbow, if you will. And I think that is the number one thing we get is time, right? So all of the time you spend chauffeuring your child around, talking to your child, cooking for your child, whatever those activities are, when they leave, you get all of that time back. And so the question, right, to make the most of your empty nest, journey post-active parenting is, what are you going to do with that time, right? And have you always wanted to write? Have you always wanted to paint? Have you put on a few pounds and you said, if I had more time, I'd exercise? Those are the gifts that you're given, an opportunity to really explore relationships that you haven't explored before, reconnect with friends, reconnect with your spouse. I mean, the list is endless. And so I think if you can focus on those things and prepare for those things before your children leave, then the transition is much, much easier.
Yeah, I can imagine. And are your sort of friends and peers in the same stage, or is it sort of mismatched?
Yeah, it's funny. They're when they have in the US, they have something called back to school night. And so when my son was in first grade, my wife and I went to back to school night, and there's a room full of parents. I don't know. My son is 6 years old or 7 years old. And my wife says to me, look around this room, Anthony, because these are the people who you are going to be friends with for the next 20 years. And I kind of just, laughed off that comment. But and whether that's true or not, those are the people that are going through the same experiences you are through your life, right? And whether it's scouts or, sports, or it's all the activities that kids do, you do connect with those parents. So we had a lot of friends and they all had children about the same age. And everything's relatable. And then all of us are kind of going through this together, if you will. But you probably know better than anyone, it's a very personal thing. So in some ways, it's not openly discussed. People, there's some vulnerability to it. To say, for me to say to another friend, hey, I'm really concerned about Zoe leaving. I'm going to miss her completely. It saddens me. There's a lot of vulnerability in that realization. So I think a lot of people keep it to themselves, and they struggle on their own, thinking that maybe they're being emotional or maybe they're weak or whatever that is. And so, for me, I would love for this to just become more of a topic of a conversation, more of this is something we all acknowledge and understand, right? And so when it happens to our siblings, when it happens to our friends, we can understand it and support them, right? As much as look for them for support.
That
was a long answer.
No, it was perfect. But I just wanted to say that I love, to be honest, the fact that you're a man saying this is great, because I do believe that there is an expectation that women would be sad when their child leaves the home. But I think, honestly, people think men maybe it doesn't have the same effect on men, which is clearly it's not true.
It is not true.
But exactly, and the men probably don't have that space to be able to share that, like you just said. And so it is great that you're doing this, and hopefully we can reach more men and that have that same feeling of I miss my kids, and now what do we do now? Stumbling through it like the rest of us, and hopefully find some sort of way to navigate it with your book. But I did want to say, because when I read your bio and you wrote that you were impersonating an accomplished hiker. And I love that. So I'm assuming that you got this now new lease of life and doing all these exciting things with this time you've now gained back?
Yeah, it is fine. I named my son Everest.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to climb Everest when I was 30 years old.
Wow.
And my wife read John Krakauer's book Into Thin
Yes,
Air
yes, I
and
have to.
said, "Over my dead
No.
body, are you going?" So the funny thing is, a few years later, we named our son the one thing that I wasn't allowed to do. But on his 16th birthday, I always told him I would take him to Everest. So we hiked, not Mount Everest, but hiked to Everest Base Camp
Oh,
on
did
his
you?
16th birthday. Yeah, it
Wow.
was fantastic. And so I guess to, impersonating an accomplished hiker, I don't think I'm that much of an
No.
accomplished hiker, but there are, I do make it a point now, mostly with my spouse, to do more fun things, to anticipate activities,
Yeah.
for Christmas, for my family, we don't give gifts. I don't give physical presents anymore. We give experiences. So my daughter's down in Southern California going to school.
Yeah.
I bought her 2 plays at her school that she could go to at the local arts.
I love
I bought a
that.
family thing that we can all do this summer.
Yeah.
With my wife, we go to plays and concerts and things like that. So I'd rather spend time with them and have things that we can look forward to together, and they look forward to these things, versus spending money on another pair of pants that will just end up thrifting later, somewhere else.
I wanted to address 2 things. If you could speak to the parent who is sort of in the early days of parenthood and can't even imagine the empty nest life, what would you say to them? What would you say to yourself when you were, I don't know, 20 years ago or so, who couldn't envisage this? How would you prepare yourself for this?
Yeah, that I would probably tell my younger self to relax a little bit. I think I'm a self-admitted helicopter parent. I over micromanaged grades and what they were doing in many ways. And I think, giving your children a little more freedom and responsibility, a little more trust. I would tell my younger self to do that. Now, I think mine turned out okay. And it couldn't have been absolutely horrible, but I would tell my younger self to just, empower them more, let them make mistakes. Don't worry about them making every mistake you ever made, because they're different people. Right. And I think we get caught in our heads with, I wish I did this when I was in high school, and I wish I did this when I was younger. And so you assume that your child will do that or won't do that. And I think that's a very wrong assumption. So that's the first thing I'd tell them. And then I guess the second and most important piece is just communicate with them open and honestly as much as you can, at their level. Be supportive, listen, communicate. It seemed like whenever something really went bad, someone crashed a car or something went bad, instead of reacting like my parents did, which was very overreacting, for me, a sense of calm would come over me and my wife. And it would be more a learning experience or a relatable experience about, hey, I'm glad you're okay. I'm upset about the car, but the car isn't important. What's important is, how did this happen? What can we learn from it, et cetera? I wasn't a perfect parent, Paula, right? There were times when I flew off the handle. There were times when I took things personally, right? There were times when emotions got involved. But for the most part, just trying to understand and relate to them, because now I want to have a future where my children want to come home and where they want to be here for holidays and when they want to spend time with me. And that starts at an early age. And so you want to be that parent, and I want to be that parent. And for now, I think, I'm in a good space, knock on wood. And I hope it continues, because I love spending time with them, and I want to be part of their lives just like I want them to be part of my life, as we move forward.
That's the main thing, isn't it? You want them to want to come back home.
Yeah.
They want to come back and spend time with you. I just wanted to pick up quickly on what you said about because I think sometimes as parents we tell ourselves we have this narrative in the back of our mind, and we have like a horror story of if they get one bad grade they're never going to get a job, or
Yeah.
we catastrophize, don't we? And like you said, we have to have a little bit more trust and a bit more calm, because we over catastrophize one bad grade, one accident, one little thing, and we think that defines their whole future, and it doesn't.
Absolutely. And we should allow them to make mistakes, right? I mean, we want our daughters to be safe, for example, in our safe example, but you can't keep them in a bubble. That's not going to teach them to be strong. So there's a balance, right? There's a balance to be overprotective, be protective, but not overprotective, and let them stumble at times through high school drama, through whatever those ups and downs they may be going through. Be there to support them, but those help them grow, right? Those missteps, those bad grades, those whatever that helps them grow.
Yeah.
And so you can't make them perfect, and they can't live in your image if you have one for them.
Yes, that's right. They're people in their own right, not reflections of ourselves. And then just to the person or the parents, the couple who are on the brink of this stage and who are just having a little bit of a panic, what can you say to just maybe alleviate some of their fears?
Yeah, I think so. Just really quickly, there's a lot going on with a person from 45 to 60 years old, let's say. These kids are leaving. There's menopause, there's aging parents. They're not ready to retire. They're probably job plateauing. There's midlife crisis. There's potentially health concerns. There's a lot going on for this stage in that adult's life. Yeah. And so and as in my example, you're very career focused. You're focused on the things you have to do. Are you focusing on your relationship with your spouse? Are you focusing on yourself? Are you focusing on your relationship with your children? Or are we all just caught in a routine where we're working and we watch movies and fall asleep and then wake up and then go back to work, or whatever that is? I think what I would tell parents now entering the stage is start thinking about it. Start thinking about how you can prepare your child. Start thinking about some of the conversations you want to have with them before they leave. Think about what you want to do with that time. I think a lot of people, we didn't talk about gray divorce, but 1 in 3 divorces in the United States are people over 50 years old right now. 20 years ago, it was 1 out of 10. And so today it's 1 out of 3. So Paula, you and I are married. We go about our lives. And then all of a sudden we look at each other at 55 years old. Our kids are gone. You like to work. I like to play golf, whatever that is. And we're not connected anymore. So I would tell, for the married people out there, I would tell them to refocus and kind of rededicate themselves on this next chapter with their spouse. And for the single parents, I think it's more important to reconnect and focus on what you want in your life moving forward.
Very, very true. Very true. So with your book, what is the main message that you would like readers to get from it?
Yeah, you come away creating 4 plans. And I'm writing the next one, which is for single parents. Because I knew when I was writing this last one, it was very couple focused. Although, half of the book applies, but I feel like there was a lot of couple focused messages in there. So the next one is for the single parents, which is similar but different. But I'm sorry, your question was,
what would you like readers to get out of the main message?
What I really want them is just, at the very basic level, just understand this time in anyone's life. And like I said earlier, if we all go through this transition as parents, all parents go through this transition. So you can be a better friend, you can be a better brother, sister, you can be a better spouse, partner, and you can set yourself up for a better future by just understanding the basics about becoming an empty nester and understanding the emotional toll it may take, understanding the control issues that you may need to relinquish, understanding all of those things that will be happening to you through this phase of life. And I think with that understanding, you're in a better position to react in a positive way and not overreact and be prepared for this next phase. And I think the next phase can be phenomenal, especially if you start planning for it. But you just need to even realize it's there.
Yeah. And just very last question. What would you say, if you had a word or a sentence, is parenting like in this stage? What would you call that?
Parent-child is active parenting, right? And all parts of their life, you are giving advice and counseling and hopefully supporting. Parent-adult, the support is still there, but I think you pull back a little bit, to be honest.
A little bit or a lot.
They need to grow so that and they're going to grow. They're only going to grow when they're out of the home, as if you're not calling them and texting them every 10 minutes, if you're giving them a little responsibility, if you're trusting them. And so I think, letting go would be my word to say, just let go. But at the same time, remember to stay as connected as you can in a supportive way without overwhelming them or smothering them. And so there's a fine art. And I'm sure I wish you were around when I was raising my kids, because I would have hired you in an instant. But there's that balance, right? Between being there for someone and yet, every time they have a problem, they can't come to you. They have to resolve it themselves and figure it out on their own. And that's probably true when they're teenagers. And that's even probably true when they're little kids. Although it took me a long time to learn
that. Hard. It is hard. Oh, wow. Well, thank you. But please let us know where we can pick up your book and where we can connect with you online.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, the book is on Amazon. It's on all online stores. And it's called The Empty Nest Blueprint. And if you Google The Empty Nest Blueprint, you'll find me. Unfortunately, I have that long Italian last name, but there is AnthonyDameschino.com. That's DAMASCHINO.com. And I'm also, like you, I'm on Facebook and I'm on Instagram, and I have a few things out there on YouTube. But you can find me if you look.
We'll Google you. Well, it has been so lovely speaking to you. I feel like we could go for another half an hour.
I know. I know. When the next book comes out, we're going to talk about parenting styles, empowering girls, parenting.
Yes.
There's so much.
There is so much. Well, thank you for coming on, and good luck with the book. And hopefully you can come back and have a with me again.
Thank you. I'd love to.
Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time.